Great, thanks, Nicole, and welcome everybody back. We are just doing the series here, as it was mentioned, and hopefully everybody either attended one of the first general overview of STEP or saw the recording. And so we are not going to go over all that again, other than just a quick reminder with regards to what those STEP countermeasures were. So I do have a couple of slides here that I will show. But before I do that, I just want to shamelessly plug an event that we have coming up in the month of September. Every Wednesday in September, we've got a safety subject topic for you. And so it is the EDC Virtual Safety Summit Series. And so every Wednesday is the past EDC safety effort. So if you didn't have an opportunity the first time to sign up or learn about it, come join us, and we will provide, one of my colleagues actually on the line will put a link to the chat or to the link in the chat pod. So Tim or Keith, if you guys can do that for me, I appreciate it. And I think these PDFs will go out, so you'll have the link as well. Once again, the reason we're here is because, first of all, I was thinking about this. We talk about deaths, and there's a lot of negative news, and we know that the fatalities of pedestrians are going up. 44% compared to overall all other fatalities, just 9%. But there's such a lot of negative news lately, and I thought, there's a better way to put this. And I think it'll sort of reflect on the fact that we've got three great presenters today from the city and some hometown boys, right? And you guys they're doing some great things. And STEP is all about saving lives. And so, yes, the numbers are going up as far as pedestrian fatalities, but you know what? I bet we don't report as far as the number of lives that have been saved. And it's hard to track, it's hard to say, but I know that we have saved a lot of lives, especially there in California, especially with Dodgy in Stockton, with Phil in San Diego, and Zed in Santa Ana. These guys are going to present to you some great stories, case studies, and what they've done with regards to implementing some of these STEP countermeasures. And the great thing is that you guys have the opportunity to be able to ask them questions on how they went about it. And so once again, the deeper dive is more with regards to the countermeasures in this particular session today. We do have two other sessions that we will be looking at down the road next month and in November. You probably all got that information as well. If not, Nicole will send out more information. But we'll get into the implementation and then policies and funding in those other sessions. So if we can sort of try to keep as much to the questions to the specific countermeasures first, and then if we want to get into maybe some processes, if we have time, we can do that as well. So, but once again, just a quick reminder with regards to these spectacular 7, and 6 of them are on this table, table 1, which you can find in the Guide for Improving Pedestrian Safety at Uncontrolled Crossing Locations. We really encourage everyone to download that and take a look at this. And then the spectacular 7, just a quick reminder with regards to what these are: the crosswalk visibility enhancements, which actually has several subcategories with marking, signs, lighting, intersection geometry, such as curb radii and curb extensions. And then you have raised crosswalks, pedestrian refuge islands, the RFB, the PHP, road diets, and leading pedestrian interval. Remember, the leading pedestrian interval is the only spectacular, treatment that is not in that guide. It's specifically for signals. So with that, quick reminder, I will go ahead and stop sharing, and we will turn it over to those that you want to hear from. And we'll start off with the city of Stockton. So Nicole, if you want to hit start with the go with Dodgy, we'll start there.
Great, I will get that set up and share my screen. And Dodgy, you can take this moment to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, Dodgy Vidal. I'm with the City of Stockton, City Traffic Engineer. Hopefully that you find this information very informative. Thank you.
And okay, we're seeing it. It's coming up, Nicole. So,
the City Traffic Engineer for the City of Stockton, and this morning
Are we having some buffering issues?
I believe we are, everyone. Just give me a moment. Thank you for your patience.
And if need be, we could always have just Dottie do it live.
Yeah, I can.
All right, well, let's try it one more time. And if it fails, Dodgy.
I'll take over. I'll take over on this side, see if it works that way.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daji Vidad. I'm the city traffic engineer for the city of Stockton. And this morning I'll be doing a presentation on a deeper dive into countermeasures for safe transportation for every pedestrian. For the purpose of discussions regarding countermeasures in this presentation, I'll be focusing into projects from the Highway Safety Improvement Program funded projects that we have, applications from Cycle 5 to Cycle 10. So as we get into the deeper dive of countermeasures, one question I have here is, how does the city identify countermeasures for pedestrian projects? As part of our assessment, we rely on the accident data. So we dive deep into the details of the accident report. We pay close attention to the crash factors. We do a field review and note existing conditions. We try to understand the diagrams in the report as much as possible. We visualize the incident as reconstructed in the accident report, take into account the recommendations in the report, take into account the contributing factors to the crash. Road conditions at that time, was it affected by weather? Road geometry, line of sight, what was the driver behavior, any roadway hazards? The ultimate goal of a countermeasure is to reduce crash fatalities and severe injuries. Here's a summary of city projects involving pedestrian improvements from HSIP, from Cycle 5 to Cycle 10, which is 2012 to 2020. Total grant about a little over 32 million. The count that we got here is application total for pedestrian related projects were 15, total granted 14. So now we're getting into the deeper dive countermeasures. Listed below are the 4 main countermeasures that the city utilized in our pedestrian improvement projects. Rectangular rapid flashing beacon in school zones, leading pedestrian intervals with accessible pedestrian signal, APS, a road diet, and pedestrian hybrid beacon. In this case here, we utilized Hawk. So for the next few cycles here, from Cycle 5 to Cycle 10, I'm going to go over the countermeasures that were identified for each of the projects. So in Cycle 5 here, I have 3 countermeasures, 3 separate projects. The countermeasure here for the first one is rectangular rapid flashing beacon in school zones. So the locations here are identified on roadways that were near a school zone. There has been communication and actions taken prior to help improve safety in there. However, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon was the best suited treatment for those school zone areas. This was communicated with the schools and the communities, and we got the project going and they were implemented. And we're still checking on the monitoring in there. Indications show that the accident history has lessened, has gone down as far as reported incidents with pedestrians. The other 2 countermeasures here, Harding Way and El Dorado, Harding Way and Center Street, California and Washington, and California and Lafayette. These are APS projects, accessible pedestrian signal. They were also timed with LPIs, leading pedestrian intervals. There was an accident history, in particular, Washington, California, I believe, where there was a fatality. So that's what drove some of these requests for APSs or look into pedestrian improvement treatments. So for Cycle 6 pedestrian projects, we received funding to implement rectangular rapid flashing beacon on various roadways such as Aegis Panos Center and other places here in Stockton. The next one here is pedestrian crosswalk safety improvements on West Lane, which included high visibility crosswalk, ADA ramps, and other markings and signing. Another one here is pedestrian crosswalk safety improvement with a signal on B Street and Arch, which included APS, crosswalk across Airport there, which is still a busy roadway. So for Cycle 7 pedestrian project, we received funding to install a hawk on Airport Lane, Sonora. This is basically to help facilitate pedestrian crossing from one side of the street to the other. There are both sides of Airport having bus stops, and this project is in conjunction with a partnership with RTD. So for Cycle 8 pedestrian projects, the first countermeasure here is the hawk. This is at Carolyn Weston Boulevard and Ishigoto Street. Initially, this was looked at as a possible rectangular rapid flashing beacon, but due to the nature of the incidents that occurred on there, and also Carolyn Weston being a higher volume and higher speed, a hawk was more suitable. So that was decided and implemented. Another one here is the countermeasures in the school districts. So between the schools in the area and the communities, these were discussed as being more effective as rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Another project here, it's a road diet on El Dorado from Hammer Lane to Murata. This is switching your typical 4-lane into 3-lane. So this will have a 2-way left turn lane, a single lane on each side. Bike facilities will be installed in there, as well as other treatments to slow traffic down. So for Cycle 9 pedestrian projects, the first countermeasure here is rectangular rapid flashing beacon. On the location shown here, these roadways are high volume, which require the attention of the driver to the crosswalk. So in instances where reported pedestrian involved accidents were reported, an RFB was the best solution to gain that attention from the driver. The next countermeasures, the pedestrian crosswalk safety improvements, which involve doing high visibility crosswalks, realigning the pedestrian path to be in line with proper location in there. This location is very challenging because of the geometry and the grade separation that's involved in the path of travel. The countermeasure, the next one here for accessible pedestrian signal at El Dorado, Robin Hood, El Dorado, Ben Holt, and March Lane and McGaw. These will include APSs as well as the leading pedestrian interval. That'll help improve crossing for pedestrians. So for Cycle 10, we have a countermeasure of hawk. This project involves installation of hawk at 8 locations, generally in the downtown area. That project is awarded about $5.5 million for the installation, including design of the hawk locations. Another countermeasure here is pedestrian crosswalk safety improvement at the locations of Madison Street, intersecting with Willow, Vine, Rose, Magnolia, Acacia, Poplar, and Flora. And lastly here is an APS on Pacific and Harding and Lincoln as part of a signal upgrade, including APS is there to help pedestrians cross. Now we'll get into the challenges that presented itself during the design for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So the countermeasure here is pedestrian crossing improvements. The challenges are tight or limited existing space for pedestrian paths. Vehicle lanes are also tight on railroad grade separation. Existing conditions are antiquated, limited funds. Although limited, we are able to design and deliver the project. There's in the application process, there's some strategized in the application to keep a competitive benefit over cost ratio. This is the aerial photo of or aerial view of the location at Dr. MLK at Aurora. And as you can see over there with the highlighted areas of the crosswalks where pedestrians are crossing the street or changing from going to the pedestrian paths from the roadway, from the street section. To the right side of the U in there is the grade separation. Here's a view from the surface street with MLK and Aurora. A crosswalk is designed across Aurora here while making certain that the design will not create a blind spot for vehicles making a right turn from MLK. The next project that we have challenges on is the Airport Way Sonora Hawk. This one is located south of the Crosstown Freeway with bus stops on both sides of Airport Way with no current marking on the crosswalk. Upgrading of ADA ramps with the underground utilities was a challenge in the design process. Trying to locate the best place for the ramp and also trying to stay away from the underground utilities. Another issue that came up that we are looking into is timing, possibly timing the signal on Hazleton to the south to make sure that progression is at a safe pace when folks are crossing here. We want to make sure that they're timed correctly to make certain that it's safe, not creating additional issues. And here's a picture looking south on Airport Way. As you can tell, there's a bus stop on the left side, and then there's a bus stop on the right, just across Sonora. And if you can see here, if you look down the vanishing point of Airport Way, you can see that signal on Hazleton. Another project that we had challenges on is the rectangular rapid flashing beacon at locations on Alpine Sutter, Pacific Elm, and Hunter Channel. So one of the examples I'll point out here is the Hunter Street and Channel. This one, due to the limited funds on it, we decided to keep it in-house so we can design appropriately and also deliver the project within that budget. The location of pole standards are in conflict with existing utilities and existing street lights or signs. The challenge there is making certain that when we start placing our hardware pole standards, we do not create another project to relocate utilities or be in conflict. Another one is coordination effort with other projects in the general area, as traffic control during construction may become an issue. If there's work on an adjacent project close by, we'll make certain that the traffic control addresses the correct flow of traffic. So this is a view looking south on Hunter Street at Channel. Just showing, if you take a look on the left side there, there's a fire hydrant, and naturally there's underground water utilities, the existing ADA ramp in there, and also across the street on the other side, and also across the street on the right side there. Another location that we faced challenges on was the Carolyn Weston Boulevard at Ishigoto when a hawk was installed. This is a second installation of a hawk in the city, and drivers are still getting familiar with the hawk. Speeding is predominant along Carolyn Weston, and so folks are still hesitant crossing in there, even though the lights have a signal to allow pedestrians to cross and to stop drivers. With the early stages of after installation, we noticed those things were happening. So City Council council member created a educational video to help guide pedestrians and drivers when they're facing the hawk signal. That helped, and it seems to be helping as we move forward with the installation of additional hawks in the city. Here's an angle view looking westerly direction. Ishigoto Street is to the left, creating this as a T intersection. We installed a no left sign, blank out sign for drivers coming from Ishigoto. The challenge there was it had to be wired to the timer, so it's coordinated with a flashing yellow face for Carolyn Weston Boulevard. We noticed cars were still entering the crosswalk even when pedestrians were still in the crosswalk. But that trend is now dissipating, I believe, because of the exposure of this hawk being in place for a while, and also the video that was created by council member. Here's another view of the intersection with this is looking east with Ishigoto to the right there, and you can see the trail on the right side and the left side there that kind of follows the pedestrian crosswalk. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, everyone. So I'll be here to.
And Dodgy is here with us. So thanks for that, Dodgy. And maybe you can turn the camera on. And we've got a few minutes, maybe a couple minutes, so we can maybe take, and we will take questions at the end. We've got plenty of time for all our presenters to be able to answer questions. But as we make the transition, maybe we can take one or two. So if you do have a question, just give us a, is it a thumbs up or a hand, I guess, raised hand? Yeah, there is.
Peter, can you just have them ask the easy questions?
Okay. Well, you already addressed the challenges. So Nicole, I see you have your hand up, so I'll give you the first opportunity.
I was just showing an example of what the raised hand looks like, and I'll also place in the chat box how to find your raised hand. Great,
thanks. And if not, go ahead and you can also, if you don't want to raise your hand or ask it audibly, you can go ahead and type your questions into the chat pod. We'll be monitoring those and we'll be addressing those at the end as well. So does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask audibly though? Because it's nice to have the interaction though first, with especially on the webinars.
I have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead, Shahid.
Yeah, hi, how are you? Hawk signals, I know, I'm not really lately not much worse, but I believe hot signals are not for intersections. They are mid-block crossings, uncontrolled. So is that hawk signals which you show, I believe, looks like that was an intersection installation. Is that allowed in California MUTCD? I thought it was not allowed in MUTCD because I installed 10, 15 years ago in Virginia, a lot of those. But we were just installing in the mid-block crossing. We're not allowed to do it at the intersection, you know. So maybe that has changed.
Great question. And Dodgy, you want to take that first? And I
Yeah.
can talk ahead.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
So Shahid, right? Yeah, you're right. The preference is to have those mid-block, but in this case here, we're trying to make a connection on the trails to make sure that there's a complete control of that rather than having a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That's why I said we did a special treatment for the left turn, because those are the things that'll kind of creep up, you know. So we put a signal there to stop cars coming from the bottom of the T. So we made it work. In essence, it's like a signal for the intersection for pedestrians. So it's more of a it's not a non-standard, but a better way of doing it at the intersection, if that makes sense.
No, great work. You know, great work. I think that's the major highlight of the hawk signal. You make something work in an innovative way. So thank you so much. Appreciate that work.
We have a great team here that kind of thinks those up, you know.
Yeah, no, I know where to go if we install a hawk signal.
And just the note on the national level, and this is why we actually wanted the local California folks to present, but I do know that it is a should condition with regards to hawks at intersections at the national MUTCD. I don't know if California did something more stringent, and that will go away in the next MUTCD edition, where most of the research happened at intersections when it was first being tested, and they didn't have any problems. So it is currently, even right now, a should condition for PHBs or hawks at intersections. So I want to get to our next presenter, but Robert and Edri, if you want to go ahead and put your questions into the chat pod, or Robert, did you have a comment, quick comments? I want to give you the opportunity since it may be more regarding to answering the question possibly, but.
Yeah, just a quick one, if I can, Dodgy, when you had mentioned about drivers getting used to the hawk signal, we've had that same issue in our city where we've installed one. Drivers pull up and they're not sure what to do. They kind of treat it like a blacked out traffic signal. Some just stop at it, even when it's dark. Others are kind of surprised by it and just drive right through it. And the signage, the drivers don't seem to be able to read the signage on the mast arm. So have you found ways, the most effective ways of getting drivers familiar with the kind of unusual operation of a hawk versus a traffic signal?
Good question. For our side here in the city, what we've done is we kind of relied more on the education part. So we had a video made to let everyone know how that is. And I believe as folks drive through not intersection, but areas that has a hawk, they'll get more familiar, kind of like roundabout. At first, you're kind of hesitant. But then there's always someone who's always in a rush and not taking this seriously. You know, they think, oh, it's just a pedestrian crossing. But in time, when everyone gets into that mode of respecting the hawk, they'll get familiar to it. But as far as what we're doing, I think it starts with education, letting everybody know that, hey, this thing exists out there. And the more we can install these, we've got 8 coming up in the city. And thanks for plug-in for Caltrans. Thanks for allowing us to do that. So we have 8 more coming in, and I believe after those installation of 8, I can see the trend, everyone getting used to it.
Great question, great discussion, and we'll probably get some others to maybe chip in as well. So let's move on to our next presenters in Santa Ana, and that will be William and Zed. You guys want to go take it away?
Of course. Let me share my screen here first.
As they're doing that, continue to, and maybe if there is some people in California that could also address some of the questions in the chat, that's also helpful, but continue to just add your questions in the chat pod. We'll be monitoring that.
Could you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Zed Kekula. I'm the principal civil engineer for the city of Santa Ana. It's basically the same as a traffic engineer for the city. I do have with us as well Willem Galvez, our city engineer, who may chime in if needed and may be present or available also for questions at the end. So what I want to do is just kind of talk about what we do here in Santa Ana in terms of the STEP program, pedestrian safety. I'm going to talk about primarily our active transportation projects because that's kind of what we're looking at, the bigger umbrella for the city of Santa Ana. But obviously, the active transportation program includes pedestrian elements, which includes the STEP components. So I want to start off by just kind of briefly talking about why Santa Ana. What do we need these things for, these improvements in Santa Ana? Well, Santa Ana is a pretty unique city. It is one of the most congested or heavily densely populated cities in the country, actually. So what happens is we obviously have a lot of schools throughout the city. If you happen to drive during the time that schools are going in or out of school, you are going to see a sea of kids crossing these streets throughout the city. Some of the pictures on the left and the middle right show this, and that's very typical throughout the city. In fact, because of the economic situation in some of the disadvantaged parts of the city, we have up to 80% of our student body that actually walks to and from school. So obviously there's a high demand for pedestrian activity here and making sure that they get to and from these schools safe. We also have our downtown, which is one of our most active pedestrian activity areas throughout the city, especially on the weekends. There's a lot of people that come in. There's a lot of nightlife. So definitely there's a lot of activity there as well. We have a transit center, high density population or high density housing in the vicinity. So very, very active with pedestrian activity. And then we also have several areas in the city where we have senior housing and high density senior housing at that. So we got to make sure that we take care of all of our pedestrians in the city, including those that are maybe a little less agile to walk around and to be mobile. But going back to the ATP side of things, we want to make sure that we address the needs of all of our users in Santa Ana. We definitely have a lot of skateboarders in the city, bicyclists as well. And the last thing I want to point out in terms of the needs for the city is the transit. We are faced with the fact that 55% of the residents in Santa Ana do not have access to a personal vehicle. So unfortunately, a lot of these residents are forced to use other methods of transportation to get to and from their destinations. And in terms of transit, the OCTA, the Orange County Transportation Authority, which services provides a bus service here in Orange County, 50 of the highest 100 bus stop locations are within the city of Santa Ana. So our transit use is extremely important. And for us in the city, we want to make sure that the transit users are able to get to and from their destinations safely and make sure that their last mile connectivity is very viable for them. The last thing I want to talk about needs is the fact that we have conducted various ATP planning documents, and one of them was a Safe Mobility Santa Ana, which is our Vision Zero document for the city of Santa Ana. And unfortunately, one of the realities we have here in terms of the needs is we average about 6 fatalities, pedestrian fatalities per year, and that is absolutely unacceptable. We are also a focus city, FHWA focus city, meaning we do have a high rate of pedestrian and bicyclist collisions. So there are some of the things we need to address. The way we've been doing it is by focusing on a lot of different planning documents. We've completed 2 separate complete street plans that identify specific corridors, as well as the specific mitigations that would be required to address those concerns along those corridors. We do have our active transportation plan, and we have a citywide safe route to school plan as well. One thing I want to point out too is that we actually also have a complete survey of all of our city sidewalks and wheelchair ramps so that we know where we need to do these improvements. Santa Ana is really active in terms of applications. When we do these planning documents, We do not want these planning documents to just sit idle in anyone's desk or office. We are very aggressive at pursuing grant applications. This is just a sample of the applications we submitted for the California Active Transportation Program. The last cycle, these are all done by in-house staff. So it really is a team of dedicated engineers we have here that want to make sure that we do what's right for the residents in the community. And it's really a major effort for us to do that. But by doing this, we end up having a success in terms of acquiring grants. From 2014 to 2018, we acquired about 41 different grants for active transportation, totaling about over $70 million over that time frame. So these grants have provided us for the planning opportunities to identify what are some of the needs in the city, various bikeway improvements, sidewalk improvements, crossing improvements, as well as educational outreach. It's the sidewalk improvements and crossing improvements that are really geared toward the step improvements. So what I want to do now is kind of just start talking briefly about some of the projects that we've done specifically here in the city. And I want to start off by talking about this location, which is Maple at Waycount. Maple is our primary, well, it's one of our primary bicycle corridors or bike trails we have in the city. It runs a long stretch in the city, and it has a lot of different crossings that are unprotected, such as the picture you see here before you. One of the complaints we had in the past about this locations, or all of these locations, is, hey, the streets are too wide, cars don't yield. We needed to make it safer. So as part of the planning process for this particular bicycle corridor, we ended up coming up with solutions, which included doing bulb outs along all of the crossings along this bike trail. The picture here, you could see the bulb outs on the left and the right side. We also added high visibility crosswalks and all of the associated signage and markings for that. One of the things I do want to point out in this picture is we do want to go back to these locations, especially the ones that are uncontrolled, and add in the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So fact is, we went in, we did what we could, but we want to go back and make sure that it's even more safe than it currently is, or at least provide some more enhancements. So this is another picture of the same location. This one here just kind of highlights the actual bulb out that were installed. One of the things that we're very fortunate to be able to do at this location, because there is a lot of crossing every which way at these locations, is to add dual wheelchair ramps. So it does provide a little more direct crossing for the pedestrians and even bicyclists who are using this. Here's another picture of the same crossing. As you can see, the crossing is very visible for the bicyclists as well as pedestrians. One of the things I do want to point out, again, we go in, we do work. One of the complaints that we received after the project was completed is, hey, you know what? We still have cars encroaching into the crosswalks. So part of the thing that we want to do now is, again, go back and put some of the advanced yield signs or in yield bars to make sure that cars are not encroaching into the facility there. One thing I want to point out here is also the bulb out. When the project was being constructed, we did get complaints from some of the local residents. They were concerned, hey, you're going to be removing our parking. So one thing I do want to share is, when you do the bulb outs, parking, at least in Santa Ana, again, I mentioned it's a high density city. Some areas have high demand for parking. So parking is a very real need for the community. So we're very sensitive when we do bulb outs. We need to make sure that we take advantage of locations where there may be existing red curb or maybe a fire hydrant, so that we minimize the potential of parking loss for the community. Here is another location that we basically did some pedestrian crossing enhancements. This particular corridor is on Broadway. It is just south of our downtown. The street here is a little bit wider than your typical residential. So it actually functions more like a collector residential, a little bit higher speeds, a little bit more traffic, even though it's single lane each direction. It's a corridor that, again, connects to downtown, and there's various schools along the corridor. At this particular crossing, just to the right of the picture, there's not one, but two schools. There's an elementary school and a high school. And this is on the safe route to school for both of those schools. So the net result is we have a location where we had a lot of crossings. Prior to the improvements, the location did not have bulb outs. It just had a crosswalk with two single lines and the minimal, the typical signage. So the improvements here did include doing the bulb outs. We did do the advanced yield bar, which are the shark teeth, as well as rectangular rapid flashing beacons on both sides. We went maybe a little bit overboard on this one. We probably could have gone away with doing it on one side, but just considering the fact that this is a location where we have a lot of the elementary kids crossing directly to and from school, we just wanted to take that extra step to make sure that is safe and as visible as possible for anyone approaching this location. This picture here just kind of shows some of the, well, actually shows the bulb out. You could kind of tell if you look at the palm trees, you can see how the bulb out actually extends into the street, which is what reduces the crossing for the children. Here in Santa Ana, one of the realities we have to deal with all the time is Santa Ana is extremely flat. So the drainage is always a challenge. So that's one of the things that our designers have to really address when we're doing these type of projects. And we just want to make sure that we don't create any kind of location where we could have some ponding and any issues related to that. The nice thing about this picture too is you can really tell, like I said, how it extends into the street. And that is a clear indication that when you have the pedestrians closer to the center of the street, they have a better view of oncoming vehicles, as well as the oncoming vehicles would have a better line of sight of any pedestrian crossing the street. One thing I do want to point out is something that we learned in a different location, but if you do put these rectangular rapid flashing beacons and you have the wireless push button associated with them, if you do put these in two different locations that may be near to each other, make sure you adjust the frequency of the device, because if you don't, you may end up in a situation where you may push the button at one intersection and it actually activates another one. So that's something that happened to us. So I just want to share that as one of the lessons learned. The next project I want to talk about is our Hazard Avenue Road Diet. This was about a 1 mile road diet on the westerly part of the city. It extends from Euclid to Harbor here in the city. And one of the things that we just want to point out here is this corridor was 2 lanes each direction. We got a lot of complaints from the community in terms of speeding, donuts, and so forth. And the concern originated as well because there's not only one, but there's 2 schools along the corridor. And centered right between the 2 schools is a park. So the area here definitely has a lot of elementary children that go to school, go to the park. So the intent was to really slow the traffic down, make the whole corridor more of a safety corridor where it's safe for everyone to get to and from their destination. Here's a picture of what Hazard looked like before. You can see the 2 lanes in each direction. Some of the areas had no parking, so the corridor was really wide and very inviting for the speeding that we would get complaints about. One thing I just want to take a quick step back on this particular corridor. When we were planning this corridor, it was originally a multi-jurisdictional project extending from Santa Ana to several cities, including the county to the west. One of the things that we ended up doing is we actually ended up applying for grant money separately. One of the concerns that we had early on was what happens if one of the adjacent jurisdictions may have issues, maybe the political will is not there to do a road diet in their jurisdiction. And if we do a joint grant, that's going to hamper our ability to move forward with what we want to do. So that was really insightful for us to do that early on, because eventually as the project progressed, the other jurisdictions who applied for a joint grant for this project actually didn't have the political will. So their project did not proceed. But fortunately, I'm glad to say that our project is actually in the ground. So the project actually showed the road diet here. We ended up going from the 2 lanes to the 1 lane in each direction. One of the things that we did here is we allowed space for parking. We don't necessarily have the parking out there right now, but we do want to work with the community to make sure that if they want us to add parking, we could do that. So we allowed it so that it's flexible for future consideration if needed. Some areas do have the parking, but not all the corridor. The bulb outs that you see here in the red area, even though we don't have a marked crosswalk or painted crosswalk at this location, there's still benefits for the pedestrians crossing or even bicyclists because the roadway is definitely a lot narrower than it was prior to the road diet. One of the things that we did to kind of keep costs down is for the raised island separating the bicyclists from the travel lane. We ended up just doweling some rebar into the existing pavement and then just pouring the concrete or the curb and gutter, the curb above that. So that actually helped keep costs down. This particular picture is one of the end result of what the raised islands look like. And I'm very happy to say that if you look at the picture, you have one of the children riding his bike to one of the schools just on the far side of the intersection. The community has been pretty happy with the results of the project, but one of the things that we want to share is, when you do these raised islands, just be prepared. Make sure you mark them properly. Cars will end up hitting them, especially when they're recently installed. So we had to make sure that we had delineators, make sure we let the neighborhood know what's going on, keep them informed. And that's kind of helped because early on we did have some cars hitting the islands, but as cars start getting used to it, that has definitely diminished. The other project I want to talk about, and this is the last project I want to share with you, is our Civic Center Drive Greenway. This project was in the downtown area. It's about maybe a half-mile corridor. This project included several traffic circles, bulb outs, crosswalks, some signal improvements, quite a bit of improvements. This corridor was definitely a little bit higher speed. It's also 2-lane in certain areas, but in other areas it was 1, but this street was super wide. And we wanted to make sure that we change the character of the roadway. For this particular project, unfortunately, there was, during the planning process, there was a local resident and advocate who was crossing the street and unfortunately killed as part of an accident. So the neighborhood was really concerned with this particular project. Fortunately, we did have the grant money available, so they were really instrumental in the planning process of this project. So what I do want to do is just kind of show some of the elements of the improvements that were incorporated as part of this project. This one here is Main and Civic Center. Even though it is a signalized intersection, I do want to point out that our safety study identified that a lot of the fatalities or accidents, pedestrian accidents, are occurring at our signalized intersections. So what we're trying to do now is make sure that we put high visibility crosswalks at our signalized intersections just to encourage and make it a little safer for the pedestrians. Along this corridor, we also ended up adding medians. Prior to the project, the street here, like I said, was pretty wide. One of the things we wanted to do just to kind of make the street look a little bit tighter, narrower, change the character, is we added this median here so that at least the street isn't as wide as it used to be. So that's definitely helped kind of change the character of the roadway. I mentioned already some of the bulb outs and crosswalks we've done at other locations. This specific location here is also one where we ended up doing bulb outs. We did the high visibility crosswalks, the advanced limit lines. The project is still in the punch list phase, and we will be adding the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. This roadway here is still in this part 2 lanes each direction. So we want to make sure that we provide some kind of enhanced lighting for the crossing there. And let's see, the last picture here is one of a traffic circle. We were asked early on, why do we want to do traffic circles along this corridor? And like I mentioned earlier, the speeds here were somewhat high, and then the amount of traffic was relatively high. So this was determined to be the best alternative. One of the things that we had to work with very closely during the project development is working with both the Orange County Transportation Authority, because this is a bus route that they are using in the downtown, and is their primary east-west route. So making sure that we had access or maintain access for their buses was important. And then we had to coordinate very closely with the Orange County Fire Authority because they wanted to make sure that they also had access to service any incident that may occur in this surrounding area. Fortunately, we were able to figure out the items and work with them closely. And the net result is what you see here in the picture. I wish I had a before picture, but I didn't. But the character of the roadway has really changed. The neighborhood's been pretty happy with it. And in fact, a local business organization put this on the news flyer just to say thank you to the city, to let everybody know what the improvements were. And that's kind of been beneficial to them, to us, and it's really helped out. Anyone that drives this corridor is really pleased with it. The traffic circles, unfortunately, do require a little bit of learning curve. When they first went in, we did have some motorists that were kind of confused. And I'm not too concerned, to be honest, when there's a little bit of confusion, because if you're a confused driver, you tend to drive slower. So a little bit cautious, but we did make sure that we reached out to the community to let them know how to use these. And right now, they've been out there for a while, so I think everything is pretty much settled. So it's pretty safe right now, pretty good. And I think with that, that closes up my presentations. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Zed. Excellent. And we do have William, I think, as well. So, but why don't we go ahead and as we transition into, or before we get a break, we'll take one question. And actually, there was one in the chat pod. So let me go and ask that one, and we'll, after Phil does his
bicycle collision
general
high ped volumes
with regards to maintenance issues, there's crash buildup behind the bulb outs in that race island that you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about that maintenance issue with the concrete island, trash buildup and such?
Oh yeah, that is a really good question, and it's something that we're working on as well. Currently, we do have a company that does our street sweeping. One of the things that we did in terms of researching to make sure that we could do the cleaning is identify what is the smallest street sweeper that could actually fit in there between the raised island and the sidewalk or the curb, and that's minimum 6 feet. So our standard is minimum 6 foot bike lane on the protected bike lane so that we could have a street sweeper go in there and do the sweeping. Unfortunately, right now, we still don't have that small street sweeper. So currently what our maintenance team does is actually hand sweep these corridors where we have these protected bike lanes. But the long-term solution is going to be to get a smaller street sweeper. So for anyone doing these protected bike lanes, make sure it's minimum 6 feet, bottom of the curb to bottom of the curb.
I guess displaying it. It's great. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's really good to see everyone. My name is Phil. I'm with the City of San Diego, and also Julio. He's on the line and will also jump in from time to time to answer some questions. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So on this one, I want to show basically our fatal and severe statistics might look a little bit different in an urban area compared to the national numbers. So you'll notice the yellow portion of that circle, over half of our fatal and severe crashes are happening at intersections. And then the purple showing the 20% near the intersections. So a full 3/4 of our fatal and severe crashes are at or near these intersections. Is a very small portion of our network. And so that, and most of these happening at traffic signals, that really informs the countermeasures that we're looking at. So our top 3 causes are red light running, pedestrians crossing against the light, and pedestrians crossing near the light. And so the countermeasures we'll be talking about today: high visibility crosswalks, countdown timers, LPIs and with their blank out signs, and roundabouts with road diets. So let's go to the next slide. I know this is coming up in some future weeks, so I'll just touch on it real briefly here. We have the FHWA proven countermeasures. That's sort of like a shortcut, so you can have a menu of things that to use. So we developed as part of our systemic analysis, which is also thanks to Caltrans grant funding. We were able to do a systemic analysis that came up with a counterpart to that, sort of a complement, which helped us to know where to apply those countermeasures, sort of a shortcut that helps everyone in our city really to know. So it's not just us doing it, also our development services folks can help, our planning folks can help. So everybody kind of is on the same page. So, and we also believe this is applicable to other cities. So you don't have to redo all the analysis that we did. It should be fairly helpful for folks. So I just want to let you know that's there, but you'll probably hear more about systemic analysis later on. And next slide. So we'll just start off talking about high visibility crosswalks and countdown timers first. So these are, basically they're going to be good no matter where you do them. And so we started with developing a city standard policy at every traffic signal. The standard is the high visibility crosswalks, every mid-block crossing, standard high visibility crosswalks. And every traffic signal, the standard is the countdown type timers. And so what this allowed is they're not waiting for us to tell them where to put them. It's just anytime a street is resurfaced, anytime an intersection gets an improvement, these things go in all across the city. And so that's been a tremendous help. And in addition, also want to thank Caltrans HSIP program again for their recent grant for several hundred intersections worth of these countdown timers that we're installing actually today and ongoing. So next slide. So here we'll talk about the LPIs, and we're trying to follow New York City's success. They did a study that showed on fatal and severe pedestrian and cyclist crashes, there was a 56% reduction with their LPIs. And so on the top chart, you can see sort of since 2014, how aggressively they've been installing them across the city. So on the right-hand side, again, thanks to Caltrans HSIP program, we're starting off with 66 locations all throughout our city. So you can see the kind of green and blue dots there. So next slide. So here was sort of a roadblock or a challenge, I guess you could say. When you're going to put in an LPI, it's basically free. You just, unless your controller can't do it, and you got to upgrade the controller. And for the most part, it's just an easy kind of programming change. But the thing that came with it is you want to make sure that people are not kind of approaching the intersection, looking left, seeing that oncoming vehicle slowing down because that, their light is red, the pedestrian gets the walk, and they don't see that because they're looking to the left. So they start to move. And so before we sort of had this, there we go. Before we had this, the policy where if you were going to do an LPI, you had to put up the static no right turn on red sign along with it, which is obviously sort of the cheap way to go, but very costly in terms of driver delay, and provided a lot of resistance to LPIs initially. And so what we did to address that is to use electronic blank out signs. Now, obviously, there's a little more costly, require some wiring, but they're dark most of the time, so you don't incur all that delay. And they come on right when the light turns yellow for the cross street. And so it's to keep that driver from then trying to look to their left and see if there's a gap. Now they're aware pedestrians crossing. We're going to put these in just with the LPIs. And so it kind of provides greater awareness to the driver as well as less delay. And so that's basically eliminated the resistance to installing these. So that's been an early success for us. Next slide. So next, we talk about roundabouts, and this, is kind of, we'll take 4 pop-outs, 4 ped refuge islands, all these high visibility crosswalks, add them all together. You put in a center island, and you've got yourself a roundabout. But the key here is it eliminates 90 to 100% of the fatal and severe type crashes that happen at traffic signals. So this is just, I know nothing else that's this effective. So well worth doing. And kind of the key to us is including road diets with these. And so I'll kind of illustrate that with the next slide. So on the top, you can see in red, it sort of illustrates the additional area that you might need for a roundabout compared to a signal along a 2-lane street. And on the bottom, it's showing in gray the area of a 4-lane street. And so what we were looking for across the city is areas on 4-lane streets, traffic signals that could be converted over to single-lane roundabouts. And so since all of that was already within the right-of-way, very little, if any, property needs to be purchased to install these. And so that makes a big difference in terms of just upfront cost. And the other piece that it really helped with, and this is one of the challenges, is not just community acceptance, but getting community excited about this. And so, and you don't want to go out there, to the community and say, oh, should we do a roundabout here, or maybe a signal? But you want to demonstrate to them the obvious benefits and why the roundabout is the right way to go. And what we did, we went out to the community once a month for about 6 months. We created a focus group, sort of a stakeholders group. And they really made the project amazing, because the thing that we focused on, every option, every alternative we gave them had the roundabouts in it, but all the alternatives focused around, what are you going to do with that space that we're giving back to you in between the roundabouts that used to be a 4-lane street? And so they came up with ideas that we weren't even considering, and in the end had a project that they love. And in exchange, they're of course supporting the roundabouts. So we gave them, in one instance, wider sidewalks and street trees along with bike lanes. So, and another key feature to kind of help through the challenges is we did a full-size mock-up in a parking lot. We invited the MTS, the bus folks, to come drive through, our fire department to come drive through. They had a great time, and we actually have drone footage on it posted on YouTube, so you should be able to do a quick search and look that up. It's pretty cool. So do the next slide. Here, this is just showing sort of what's going on across the city. So on the top left, that's our example from 2008. We had the 5 in a row in Bird Rock. That was a great success. Let's see, in 2015, we've installed 2 more, sort of in the southeast of our city on Streamview Drive. And those are set to be expanded with 5 additional ones, up to 7 in a row here in 2024. But the ones I was just talking about, I think maybe we'll have to click that slide one more time to show up the artist. There it is. So that's sort of an artist impression of what the 3 in a row in the heart of our city is going to look like on University Avenue, with those additional trees and wider sidewalks. So yeah, a lot coming up. And again, as has been a theme. Thank you, Caltrans, HSIP program, for funding those 3 roundabouts and that whole corridor there. So, and for the last slide, some of you may have heard this quote, faster alone, further together. So I kind of want to leave you with that idea, although we need to do both to end fatal and severe crashes in our city. So we can go faster with LPIs, improving the signals we have, but we're not going to get to 0 unless we have safe systems. There's kind of 2 criteria. If you forget everything else I said, remember these 2 things. Humans make mistakes and humans are fragile. So with the roundabout, you have to go slow as you're approaching to make the corners. And as vehicles are merged together, it's a shallow angle. So there's no head-ons, no right angles. It's always just a sideswipe type crash, and it's at low speeds. It's human tolerable. And then also the vehicles or drivers or pedestrians are all interacting with each other. So if one of them makes a mistake, the other one sees it right away and can compensate. It's fault tolerant. So roundabouts of the future. I just want to leave you with that. So thanks, everyone. Look forward to your great questions.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate that. And great reminder with regards to safe system and how really federal highways will be going. You'll be hearing a lot more about safe system in the near future from us. And so it sounds like San Diego is really on board and really pushing that, which is great. So we're going to go into the Q&A, but we'll start out with a quick question for Phil with regards to, actually, you brought up Bird Rock. And so since I am I guess I get the privilege of asking that first question, because when you brought up the Bird Rock, something with regards to the roundabouts, and you guys did a road diet there. And which is great because the road diets and the roundabouts, they bring in all of the different elements of the step with regards to the high visibility marked crosswalks, the splitter island being the median island, the signing and everything. So, but has traffic progression, have people complained? Has it been working well? What's your ADTs there? And is that corridor really been, I suspect that it's continued to thrive and probably economically also done really well. Can you just give us an update on that one?
Absolutely. No, it has thrived for sure. The traffic volumes have increased. I think it was 18,000 a day and it went up to 22 or something. So yeah, it's I mean, you see people crossing the street all the time and it's no problem. You know, cars are driving slow. And that's the other nice thing is they don't have to race in between because they're stopping at the intersections. They can cruise through the intersection if no one's there. So they're not racing in between them. And that's great to see.
Great, yeah. Thanks. And so we're gonna go into the Q&A. I got a question from the participants. And so you can put them in the chat pod, or if you have a question that you'd like to ask audibly as well, just go ahead and raise your hand. And we'll try to get those. But the one that I saw with regards to the LPI, it says, have you had any issues with defending the no right turn signage timing in court for vehicle violators?
Haven't been in court at all for that yet.
Great. Okay. And then let's see. I don't know if on the I think Nicole, if they raise their hand, do they come into the front page? Because I know I've got 4 pages on my screen with so many people.
Yes, they do, Peter. If you raise your hand, your name will go populate to the top of the participant tab. But before we jump into the Q&A, we do have Robert Peterson, who will be giving a HSIP Cycle 10 highlight. So we could absolutely finish the questions that you were about to go over and then jump into that before we go.
That's why I appreciate that. Thank you. And I got so excited with all the presentations. But definitely Robert, there he turned his camera on. So yes, go ahead and take it away because all the cities did seem to mention the HSIP cycle. And thank you, Robert. So take it away.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Phil, obviously, yeah, you're welcome on providing the funding. You know, that's something that we really are working hard to to make sure the HSIP program is for local agencies. And so, as you know, may or may not know, the ones on the call, we do have a local HSIP advisory committee that's represented. And so we meet 6 times a year. And so one of the areas that we really strive is our program working for everyone, and is there changes? So I would just reach out to everyone. Is there things out there that you feel like we're not capturing? We have been asked to look at road diets and the roadway reconfiguration in our guidelines to make changes in there to make it pretty clear on what we'll accept as an HIP application. So anyhow, just with that, I'll just give that plug. Just wanted to give some highlights on cycle 10. We were very successful on making funding available for PED and bike projects. So I just want to give you some statistics. And then from there, I'll just give a little plug for cycle 11. So for cycle 10, we were able to fund 300 pedestrian countdown signal heads at 357 intersections. We funded pedestrian hybrid beacons at 17 crossings, 3.5 miles of new sidewalk, 32 miles of bike lanes, 198 pedestrian crosswalks had RRFBs installed or will be installed. LPIs at 604 intersections, and new and upgrade crosswalk signing and markings at 346 intersections, and other safety enhancements at 711. So good job, everyone. As far as using the low cost and really spreading out our funding. As you know, we are very stretched with our HIP funding. I'd love to get more HIP funding within the local program. I'm working hard to make that happen. As far as cycle 11, we are looking at, as you know, we do the pedestrian crossing enhancement set aside, which provides $250,000 per agency, and they can provide an application without showing crashes. But it's, of course, we're limited on your countermeasures that you can install, but we do allow RFBs within those. Anything above that, like the hawk signals, will require a BC. But our anticipation as we go to the cycle 11, that we will probably continue with that. That's been very, very popular. And then as far as the other set asides, the guardrail upgrade probably will continue. I can tell you, probably at least say that much. As far as the other ones, we'll let you know as the committee meets together. But if there's anything that you feel like a good set aside would help you, please let us know. You can contact me or any of the folks on the committee. You can go to our webpage, just type in local HIP advisory committee, and you can see our charter, and you can see who's on the committee. And then for cycle 11, as you know, that's coming up. Sometimes it comes quickly more than I think, but it's coming up in the next year. So yeah, start looking at your roadway. But obviously the biggest thing is cycle 11 is we're requiring a local road safety plan. So that's hopefully not news to everyone or equivalent. So a SARP, if you've got a SARP completed, any other plan, a Vision Zero plan, anything that is pointing towards a plan that your council or your board of supervisors have approved and everybody's aware of, and everybody's looking at that plan, that's what we're looking for. And of course, we call it the local road safety plan. There is funding still available. Obviously, time is running short. You can even do it in-house. There's nothing out there saying that you need to hire a consultant to do your plan, but we do provide funding. But like I said, the funding is running out, but you can always add funding to that. So with that, I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Robert. And just to let you know, we do have on November 4th a session with regards to the policies, procedures, and funding, which Robert will be there and be able to answer more specific questions. We'll do a more deeper dive into that, but thanks for that. And let's get into the questions. So
I got a quick question for Robert before he goes out. Robert, you mentioned next year. When do you know when the call would be for that one?
Yeah, like every other year, we typically you'll see a call come out around March or April, May-ish timeframe. We usually have a webinar right soon after. But yeah, the time frame is usually around May. You'll see the call, maybe a little bit earlier. We'll see how things go. And then we usually give the agency up through July. I think last time with COVID, we pushed it a lot later than we would like to get the applications, but we work with the ATP folks because they do a call as well. So unfortunately we're in the same year, but I think a lot of it is because we try to match the the funding cycles of the FTIP and things. So yeah, so that's kind of the time frame, and we've been doing that's about every year. That's how we been going with that time frame.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, and as Tim Taylor and Keith Sinclair on my team also maybe help with regards to some of the questions, I'm going to address one here. I think it looked like it was from Lindell or Stanley, from Stanley Price. I'm not sure if I think they're together and they're probably a team, but it says, why do traffic professionals still call collisions with pedestrians accidents rather than crashes or collisions? And it's a great point. We actually, many years back, we did try to get people to shift from accidents to crashes. And it's really hard to get people to change terminology, but there have been people who have been making that shift. And accidents, accidents are like true accidents, a tree falling on a car, just can't prevent. While crashes, they are, I guess, accidents are preventable. Let's see, how did I go again? Sorry, getting confusing myself here as well. Accidents are preventable, because somebody who hits a pedestrian, either they're not paying attention, that's not an accident, that's a crash. And so it's a great point, Stanley, with regards to that. And we have been trying to make that shift, but I think I'll go back to more what Phil said, and with regards to fatals and crashes as well. We have fatals and serious injuries is where we're trying to get to zero. Property damage, crashes, injuries, those will happen. People make mistakes. And so just, we're not trying to get rid of all crashes. What we're trying to do at Federal Highways right now and with our partners is to reduce fatals and serious injuries. But you make a great point. If people can say crashes or collisions rather than accidents, it still does help with that, the mindset, because accidents are preventable. Okay, with that, Tim and Keith, maybe you can help with some of the questions with regards to any one of the different agencies. You want to help me with that? I know I've got some. Yep. If you also, let's see, if you raise your hand or give us, we'll call on you first. Otherwise, and this is, we've got about 30 minutes to go into the deeper dive to ask your technical questions. Okay, Cameron Sabir, see your hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. On the first presentation, the last slide in the city of Stockton, I guess, if I'm not making a mistake, there was a pattern for the crosswalk, the last slide, and I was curious what kind of pattern is that. So if the presenter is there, the last slide, he was talking about something else, but the pattern of the crosswalk caught my attention. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking that. That's our city standard. We call it a triple force. It's basically a city standard that has like four foot detail on it.
One. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a standard city detail.
I call it piano now from now. It's just like a piano keys. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
It does the job. It calls the attention to the driver.
All right. Okay.
My understanding too, and I think that's in California only that I've seen that, but my understanding was that was designed so that because of the friction or maybe the slip when there's moisture, that at least with that cut through down the middle, that there's less slippage.
See, yeah,
So,
interesting.
but that, I think that's a California specific. Hopefully that, check the MUTCD on that one.
Yeah,
But yeah.
actually, I haven't seen other cities of California. That might be my ignorance, but that's very interesting, and it caught my attention. So I'm gonna do more research, go to City of the Stockton Standard Plan to see what the details are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good question.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I've got some as well, but want to give you all the opportunity. Great presentations, and I think they covered pretty much all the spectacular 7, in addition to Phil giving us some extra with the countdown and the roundabouts, so which really does incorporate well with our road diets. Okay, Robert Olson asked, have any of the cities that have installed mini roundabouts or similar installed temporary circles to test the paths of travel before installing the permanent structures? So temporary type of installations.
Yeah, so this is Phil. I can answer that. So we did ours in a parking lot. We did it full size to scale in a parking lot, and demonstrated that the software that we use, AutoTurn software, showed the paths accurately. Was plenty accurate for our use. So, and it actually made the bus drivers were much more comfortable after seeing that. The fire truck drivers, they tend to be a little bit skeptical of your software when you talk about that, when they could drive it. And yeah, they weren't that close to the cones or the stripes or anything. They were like, yeah, this is totally fine. Yeah.
So maybe that question for the others as well is just temporary types of installations, whether to convince maintenance and emergency services, but you guys can talk about those experiences.
Oh, this is it with Santa Ana. Yeah, absolutely. The project I mentioned, Civic Center, the one we had in the presentation, the fire department and OCTA actually went out to test drive it. So we marked it out in the field for them because, yeah, I agree, Phil. They're definitely skeptical. They need to see it. So that's what we ended up doing. We also have trial traffic circles in other areas that we kind of lay out first, and that gives us an opportunity to change them during the design for when we want to do permanent ones. But it is something that I would highly recommend anyone doing any kind of mini circle. Make sure you lay it out, be in a parking lot or on the street. Make sure you kind of run it. And the other thing I want to point out too, we had a certain situation on Civic Center. There was a specific business at one of the corners that they actually have large semi-trailers that come in and go, and they have to go through these circles. So one of the things we did too for that business, we marked it out the circle right by their business, and they actually brought their truck deliveries into that area to make sure it worked for them as well. So it may not just be your fire department and transit, maybe some of the local uses may need to be part of the picture as well.
Great point about making sure you get all your stakeholders in there. Yeah.
Hey, Peter, if I may say, I think that's a very good question. My experience with the roundabout goes back 20 years. I worked for a city, and I think in 1999 or 20, we installed 2 roundabouts, and 2 years later, I have to take out both the roundabouts. Nobody liked it. And I went back to this city 3 years ago, and that city has 68 roundabouts now. So stop signs are vanishing, and the roundabout. It's just hesitancy to overcome that. But basically, later on, I end up installing a roundabout as a traffic calming measure. We call it a tight roundabout, circles or traffic circles. And the problem came back, same thing, like emergency vehicles and the school buses in particular, because they go to the neighborhood and they have to pick the kids, So if we increase the radius, and we turning radius and the circle of the roundabout, that will defeat the purpose of calming the traffic through the neighborhoods. So what we did, we kept the roundabout tight, but inside radius, instead of installing a steep curve, we call a rolling curve. So we install a rolling curve. So once a school bus will make a turn, it was okay for them to encroach upon that curve, but it may not be that comfortable for a normal household vehicle to go over to the curb. If they have to go over, still it will so. So that was quite a success. So we end up installing quite some those in our neighborhood. So that's another avenue, to do the traffic calming and cater for the emergency vehicles and the school buses, things like that.
Great point. Thank you, Shahid. I've got a question about when implementing road diets, what types of community outreach was done? Was there pushback to the implementation? And if so, how was it mitigated?
All right, this is Ed. I'll go ahead and start. At least for our standard here, we always make sure that we do some of the planning early on. Some of our planning documents are basically community led. So it's them telling us what they want, and that's what we use for developing the initial plan and eventually pursuing the grant funding. But it'll include, meetings with the community. We've had walking audits, bicycle audits, you name it, we've been doing it. So we want to make sure that the outreach is really robust early on. We've been very fortunate here in Santa Ana. The community generally is very receptive to any kind of improvements that they're going to receive. But that's not to say everyone is. And when we do have some pushback, we tend to work with those individuals on a one-on-one basis, just to make sure that they're fully informed of what are the benefits. And I think it's a matter of informing some of the individuals that may have concerns about the benefits of a roundabout. I specifically remember being at one community meeting where there was a resident who was adamant about how unsafe it's going to be when we do a road diet. I did have an opportunity to talk to her afterwards. I took the time to explain everything thoroughly to her, and it really made a difference. She went from being a naysayer to like, oh, I get it, I see it now. So I think the fact that we have to take our time, reach out to them, and make sure that they really understand the pros and cons is very valuable.
Excellent. Anyone else, Phil or Daji?
Yeah, I'll take this one. For us, we have a project. The main issue we're finding out here, especially downtown Stockton, is parking, existing parking. So we're working closely with folks who may have a business or residence in the area. We've got a road diet in one of the locations where they pretty much told us, hey, we don't want the road diet here because it takes away our parking. Some of that stuff we can design around it, but ultimately we want to listen to the general public. It may not be the time at this time for that particular project. So we're looking at alternate bike routes or another location we can build this up to. But one of our main challenges for us is the COVID. When COVID hit, a lot of the public meetings were kind of diminished to a point where we can't really hold one, and we're trying to move forward with the project. So we're working through the issues. Hopefully we can convince a lot more folks that these are good things that we're putting on the ground.
Great, thanks, Daji. Actually, it sounds like I know New Jersey put out a great video with regards to involving all their stakeholders in the process for road diets, and it sounds like maybe California you guys can maybe get together and work with Caltrans or different agencies, or even some of the local agency can work on putting together a great video to help educate people on that. So
this is it. Could I just add one other thing? I just remember one of the other things we did for hazard, we actually did a demonstration project for the road diet. So it was on a weekend. We narrowed up. It was actually in an adjacent city, but at that time it was still part of the corridor. So that's another thing that we made sure that everyone's aware. That way they get a feel for what it will look like when it's actually implemented. So that demonstration project prior to the project being constructed was very helpful.
Yeah, no, great.
Hey, Peter, if I may say, I think that very good points brought out by, because the road diet in a city, especially on neighborhood streets, which have been used nowadays in urban setting where we are cut through traffic, they almost become an arterial, more than a collector. And that's a problem. And they need a parking also on the street because most of us converted our garage to a storage place. So we need a parking also. So it's always conflict with the parking. So if it's not a we explore, it's a tested feature. We call it a pinch point. Instead of having the whole curve brought out, so we install the pinch point throughout along the corridor at various intervals, which will make the road look very narrow and then leave a space in between for parking. So we may end up losing, say, about 10 to 15% of the parking. It makes the road look narrower, and the parking gets more compact, and which even gives a more sense of a road to like a neighborhood roads. And those pinch points are a great space for pedestrian, because a neighborhood pedestrian just run from one driveway to another driveway. They don't go back. So those pinch points become a great place for pedestrian crossing, because now we have narrowed down the street throughout along the corridor. So
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about curb extensions or mid-block curb extensions in some way.
yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, great point. And there's a lot of different ways to do the reconfiguration. So I do see we have
Peter, this
go
is
ahead.
Phil. I can contribute as well. Just to mention that during our outreach, we were discussing the additional property that was given back to the community when we reduced the number of lanes. It currently had parallel parking along the street, and one of the options was to change that to angle parking. Would have increased the amount of parking spaces along there had they wanted that. They chose otherwise, but that was one of the possibilities. It's a blank canvas for them, so it's pretty great.
Great. No, great point. Back in angle parking by chance?
Oh yes, absolutely. That's
Okay.
that's the safest kind.
All right. Okay, I see a hand up, Lindell, or is it Stanley? Price, go ahead and you can ask your question. I think you're muted. We don't hear you though. We're not getting, Lindell or Stanley, we're not getting anything. I'm not hearing anything. Anyone else hearing anything? No?
Hear me now.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay. With Santa Ana's high percent of children walking to school and families getting along without personal vehicles, how can Santa Ana become a model for meeting California's goals for cleaner transportation with more walking and bicycling? Sounds like it has a head start in some ways.
Yeah, no, great question. Dodgy, you're on mute, and if you want to, oh, no, wait, it was Santa Ana. Sorry, Zed.
Yeah, you know what? It's that's a very good question. That's something we could take a look at. Right now, when you said that, I'm just thinking, when we do the ATP applications, one of the components of the application is justifying the health needs for the community. And we definitely have issues with obesity in the city. We have issues with diabetes in the city. Those are things that we definitely try to address with our projects. So, that's something we have to take a look at how we could do that, but we would definitely entertain that and be open to that. If we could be a sample for the state, we're more than willing to share the information and, provide that to whoever needs to, so that we could do that.
I do have a question. Anyone else? As we're maybe getting more questions in, maybe one for Dodgy with regards to Stockton and the RFB and PHB. Do you require that pedestrians always push the activate, hit a push button? Or do you have some actually passive types of signals? Can you talk a little bit about the activation and if they're always required to push?
Yeah, at the moment, we still have the tactile, they have to push it. I'd like to see in the future, we're going to start moving into smart cities, smart connected vehicles and all such. So we're looking ahead in that fashion. In the meantime, unfortunately, we still have to have that connection, physical connection. I know there's been breakthrough in some other research and devices in making that happen. I believe somewhere in Europe, I read somewhere there's an app that's been connected to those kind of devices that'll read or kind of sense someone's near the pedestrian zone there. But in the meantime, for the city, we still have to hit the button, pedestrian push button.
Yeah, and I appreciated you all, emphasizing the APS. It is a little different for the RFB, but APS has, really being there for all of the traffic control devices. So thanks for that.
Peter, if I think that's a good point. So you have a device available with a traffic sense too. And I personally used this device 8 years ago in Arlington, Virginia, Washington, DC. Is a sensor which sits on top of your pedestrian pole and it marks a zone. It not only marks a zone, it detects the pedestrian next move. Either they are sitting just for socializing or they are going to cross it. So they draw a profile of the pedestrian by their behavior and then place a call to call up the pedestrian walk sign.
Right.
And it's been used in Northern California. San Jose has used it. Sunnyvale has used it. We are using it in South Pasadena.
Okay.
Not only that, there's an advanced version to that where you can extend, if somebody is trapped in the crosswalk, we don't extend the walk time, but we hold the approaching conflicting movement for a greater length so they can cross it safe. So as far as pushing the button is concerned, the tactile person where you never and you place hand on that. My personal experience is, and I've done a lot of experiment in this, it is safer for a pedestrian to push a button and then cross rather than just automatically start crossing. Reason being, pedestrians, once they push a button, they get into the motion or the formation and the mentality said, no, they have to cross and the wait. If they just keep going and then they don't pay attention, and then they just jump into the field. We did an experiment in Sunnyvale, both the things, and we figured we had 2 fatalities where school kids just did not pay attention because they thought the signal will come and go back. And those intersections where we forced them to push the button because it's beeping, chirping all the time, those were much more safer than other locations.
Great. And you're from South Pasadena, you said?
Yeah, no, I'm in South Pasadena. Before that, I was in Sunnyvale.
Okay. So if anyone wants to know more about that, contact Shahid as well. So great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we have that.
I see there's a couple.
We have a federal project here. FHWA is doing a project, on same ITS on our Fair Oaks corridor. So more than happy to share that.
Okay, thank you. I see a few more questions in the chat. I don't know if we addressed this one, but is there potential? Is there crash potential from curb bulb outs / road diets, or are there markings or signage that you use to inform the drivers of these lane reductions? And I'll just say quickly, I don't know if I just froze up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you did freeze up, so we missed part of it.
Okay, so there was a question about bulb outs, and as far as federal highways, I don't know if one of the images showed that it was a lane. It looked like a bulb out, but I don't think it was. I think was it Santa Ana that did a raised island with the bike lane, but that wasn't necessarily a bulb out, it was an island. But I would just state that we don't do bulb outs into the lane, but rather only if you have parking or if you have extra space that you can do an extension. And we never do curb extensions out into the travel lane. So I don't know if there was a little confusion with regards to that due to a picture maybe possibly confusing that.
Yeah, and the picture referring to, actually it was a bulb out, but it was shadowing the parking. So it had the parking with the bulb outs at the end.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, it's just the parking portion,
Yeah.
not a lane. Yeah, great, thank you for that clarification. Question, what is the approximate, for Phil, what is the approximate cost of the blank out no right turn on red signals?
It's going to depend on the deal that you can make with your vendor. But ours, I think, is around 6,000 a piece, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that does, yeah, and you have one on every leg, right? So that can add a little bit of cost.
We always match the opposite side, but it's a question whether it's all 4 or just 2. Yeah.
Let's see.
Hey, Peter, real quick, there was a question regarding the video. I'm looking at it. Somebody asked about the video. So I posted it on a chat there. It's the video, and it goes to the link of all the crossings that we did on Western Ranch. So it has a video in there too. I haven't looked at and make sure that's the correct video, but let me know if it doesn't go through. It's a YouTube video that our council member made to educate folks in regard to walking through a hawk.
Okay, I'm seeing it now, and I don't, it's not a hyperlink, but rather maybe you have to copy and paste it into.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, I think, have these cities gotten any pushback for installing any of these treatments because of slowing down traffic, which may contribute to additional air pollution? We are in the valley, so this is always a point we hear, so. Who wants to take that one first?
Absolutely. No, I would love to talk about slowing down traffic. With roundabouts, you actually eliminate the stop for most of the day at the intersection. And so even though vehicles are going slower, especially at the critical point where it matters, where the conflicts are happening, their travel time improves, their delay reduces, their emissions reduce. Roundabouts are actually specifically mentioned in our climate action plan as though we have a minimum number we have to install to address climate change. So it's a big plus, and it slows down vehicles right where it matters. So
great, thanks, Phil.
This is Edward Santa Ana. At least in our case, when we add the traffic circle, same thing, they're very efficient at moving traffic, which is definitely beneficial for climate. And one of the things that we are able to do is actually eliminate stops. So when we put the traffic circles at certain locations without the stops in place, it actually is beneficial from that perspective. So that's something to make sure that everyone's aware of. In terms of the road diets, we do get some people complain about or expressing concern about, there's going to be more traffic. But we just haven't seen it. The ones we've done so far have been well within the parameters set for road diet, so the ADT doesn't exceed those thresholds, and we make sure that we address the timing at the intersections, because if the corridor works at the intersections, if it's signalized, that's where the congestion would occur, not mid-block.
Great, thank you guys. And I know that at least in California too, you guys are not going to be able to buy any ICE vehicles after, was it 2030? So that will also help. But Dodge, I got a question for you. You mentioned with the PHB signal timing, you time that with your signals. Do you do that during peak hours? It's timed with your signals, and then off peak hours, it's hot response, or do you have a system there which makes it, because off peak hours, when someone pushes it and they have to wait, do they maybe cross against the walk? So any thoughts with regards to the PHB beacon timing?
Yeah, Peter, I told you no hard questions. Hey, so I mentioned in there, we're looking into it because right outside my office over here, we're looking at doing one. I think it's going to be a work in progress, because once we look at it, we'll have to play with how it works with our current timing, because our current timing at the intersection are part of the grid, for progression. Now we're introducing a new signal in between those, so that's something that we have to keep watching and retiming. Okay. Hopefully, the goal is to not flood a platoon of cars when that's activated. So it's gonna be an ongoing thing that we're gonna look at. I'll be gladly sure to share it with you what findings we make on this one, because we have a few of them coming in.
Awesome, thank you, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think a lot of this, STEP has been around for, I think that we've been promoting the last 4 years. A lot of these things take time to see, and to hone in on how to get everything right. So really do appreciate all three of you guys, taking the time to present the great success stories, and who knows how many lives, you guys have saved. And we really encourage everybody else, if you got additional, we're going to actually take the questions, and Nicole will go ahead and there'll be a sheet with regards to Q&A. So it'll be all compiled. I think we did some from the past sessions as well. So I think we're just got a couple minutes left, but I'm just going to do a wrap up here real quick, unless somebody else has, I don't know if I missed any questions there or not, but thank you, everybody. Thank you all, especially to the presenters and Nicole and Sherry and my team and others. And I don't know if Maria, if you and your team, Maria is with Federal Highways in the division office. I think I saw her at one point, but if you want to do a quick intro and just introduce yourself, because she is really the division, the California contact for Federal Highways there, and everybody should know Maria. Don't know. Okay, she may have had another meeting to go to, but so thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate the great info, and maybe in the future we could also do another follow-up in maybe a year or two, or who knows. But I think that's the great thing, is to continue to tell the story to everybody else. It's just gonna, you guys are sort of the trailblazers, and will help others to continue to implement and continue to save lives so we can get to zero. So with that, Nicole, I'll leave it. If you've got any last messages, I see you put a evaluation in the chat pod, but
Great. Yes. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Really great conversations today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.